You are now listening to Protecting Your Nest with board-certified family medicine and obesity medicine specialist Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com. Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. As a clinician, I've tried to walk in the shoes of my patients each and every day. Because of the nature of my practice, I tend to see patients who have struggled with their weight. And in some ways, I think I would be a better doctor if I had similar struggles. Since I have not, I can only imagine what it's like to have been an overweight child who spent their life being called fat, teased, or even bullied because of their weight. I can only imagine being an adult who is perceived as being lazy or simply not caring because, the world perceives them at not being at their ideal weight. I can only assume that if I had lived a life like that, some of the emotions I would feel, would have me feeling shame. Shame because I couldn't overcome this weight issue. That probably would make me feel overwhelmed imagining this. So in order for me to be a better clinician, but more importantly, a better person, I need the perspective of others who have, gone through that experience. And I want to see the world through their lens, the lens that maybe they can only provide so that I can be a better clinician and a better person. That's why I've invited today's guest to provide some perspective. She understands what that struggle is, and I think she's going to help us all do the same. Today's guest is the host of the wonderful YouTube channel Road to Health Keto Done Right, Violet Reveira. And for the last 4 years, Violet has been making YouTube videos about her discovery that her health issues were caused by diet. It was the diet that she was eating. So she switched to keto, which solved her health issues, and it resulted in a 70-pound weight loss. So she's become an advocate for good mental health, which is why I follow her, because I'm all about the mind. And it really allowed for her to both achieve good physical and good mental health, and she's trying to do that for us as well. So with that, Violet, I am so excited. I've been waiting to interact with you for a while, and I want to welcome you to the Protecting Your Nest podcast.
Well, thank you for that nice introduction. And I want to add that I think that most people have some kind of struggle. And even if it's not a weight struggle, because interestingly for me, it didn't start off as a weight struggle. It started off as a health struggle. Yeah. The weight came later, which is a lot of people's story.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think no matter where you are in life, there's going to be something if you're not eating well. And the thing is, we don't link them together.
Yeah, and we should. And everything's interconnected. And even beyond that, the lessons that people may walk away from today's discussion can be applied to other areas of your life. I remember as a healthcare leader learning how to solve a problem. And a lot of it is allowing the person in front of you to help you solve the problem. But then I took that way of thinking and I applied it to how I deal with my kids. I apply it to how I deal with friends and family. A lot of times people come to you. So a lot of times when we learn lessons, it's important that we use those lessons to maybe change how we think in general and how we solve problems in general. So let's start our journey by talking a little bit about where you are. I'm a little bit below you in the US. You're a little bit above me. And I fuss about Chicago weather, but then I realized you're in Canada. I'm like, what am I fussing about, right? Because I know it's a little cooler there. So the question for you, Violet, how did you end up in Canada? And why don't you give me one of your favorite things about Canada and maybe one of your least favorite things about Canada?
My favorite thing about Canada is I was born here. So I don't know anything different than
That's
Canada.
all you know. Okay.
But my family's from Barbados. And so I have been there. And what I like about Canada is actually the change in temperature. I don't do well when it's extremely hot. So I actually like the fact that it gets cooler here. And winter, I'm a winter sport person. I ski, I snowboard. I love those things. We go take the kids tobogganing all the time. It's like that's a good time for me.
Wow. Well, we have a lot in common, but that's one we don't. I want it to be warm. I want to be in San Diego somewhere, and I totally get it though. And I think I need to, maybe you'll teach me a lesson, embrace the cool weather. And as long as I'm in Chicago, I need to embrace it. So maybe that's the first lesson you'll teach us today. So I'm
In all
definitely,
fairness,
yes.
in all fairness, can I just say that that's part of how we do better in life? When we see a problem, rather than trying to erase it, trying to figure out how do I make this better for me?
Mm.
So I do have family members who've lived here as long as me, some of them born here, some of them not, who still hate winter.
Oh, wow.
But they don't ski, they don't do any of the winter, they don't ice skate, they don't do any of the winter sports. So yeah, they're very sporty in
Yeah,
the summer,
that's right.
but they're not sporty in the winter. And they're
Interesting.
sporty people. So
And
how will that function?
that's right. And I think you're right. It's like that person who doesn't like going out having a good time until you kind of grab them and say, let's do it. And then they go out and say, I just had a good time. A lot of times it's just getting out and opening your mind to that. That is so true. So I promise you, I'm going to do something that's winter oriented just because of this conversation. So I love that. Um, you have been consistent on Road to Health, Keto Done Right YouTube channel. I watch it regularly, and I know on Mondays you try to share a video that will help your wellness warriors, and you've been doing this since 2018. So, so it's nice to be a wellness warrior as well because I do follow you, but I do want to know what your personal journey was. What led you to inspiring other people with videos? What was your personal story?
Well, my personal story goes back to 21-ish years old, because that was around the time that I started to notice knee pains.
Hmm.
And I think at the time, I didn't realize that those knee pains were food related, obviously, because I was playing a lot of sports and, you give yourself all the excuses of why you feel a certain way. The knee pains eventually turned into back pains. So now I have knee and back, and then I had elbow pains came up. And then I think at the worst, I also had a neck, how do you call it? A stiff neck that
Hmm.
could barely turn my head left or right.
Hmm.
And I did all the traditional things. So, well, not all of them. I don't like medication. So I avoided medication. But I was seeing a chiropractor and, getting adjustments done. I was stretching. I was trying to work out more. I was doing all these things and it wasn't getting better. And I feel like when, after my daughter was born, that's when the weight started to come on.
Hmm.
And of course, you just think, well, I'm not working out enough. So you do more and more. Of course, again, doing all the typical things, low fat and trying to, eat less junk food, although less isn't none, right? Because we're allowed to have some fun in life, as
That's
they
right.
always tell
That's
us.
right.
Until finally, what happened was that about 5 years ago now, wow, it's hard to believe it's been 5 years, but about 5 years ago now, I woke up one morning and my hip was just
Mm.
not cooperating. And that was the moment that I had to choose between medication or operation,
Mm. Mm.
or is there any other solution? And I was so desperate to find any other solution.
Right.
Um, Funny enough, though, I have to say that when it first happened, when the hip thing happened, what was my first thought? My first thought was, oh, it has to be this weight I'm carrying. Right? We're so brainwashed into believing that everything has to be something that's outside,
That's right.
and it couldn't be something that I'm actually doing every single day.
Hmm.
That's not healthy for me.
Mm. Mm.
So that was the door opener to finding that inflammation is caused by sugar.
Wow.
That
That's
one piece of information changed my entire life.
it's a game changer, and the foundation of achieving metabolic health is all about inflammation. So once people understand that, they will not just fix their arthritis in a 20-year-old, for goodness sake. I mean, that's crazy, right? So if we can fix that, then we can fix our risk for blood pressure and diabetes and dementia and even cancer. Who knew? So it's like the best return on investment. So I'm glad you had that discovery. My hope, though, is that we'll have a health system one day that will discover that for you. So you won't have to kind of do your own magical investigation. You'll be able to get the people to guide you, and that's kind of one of my missions in life, is to get health systems, because I'm in a large health system, to do exactly that. So it's not just you on your channel who shares messages of healing. You have this handsome guy. Shout out to Pat. And I know you do a chat with Pat, your husband, on Thursdays. And it's always nice to see that exchange. It's so funny. My wife, who's a pharmacist, just started to make YouTube videos with me, but not the way you guys do it. We're doing animation. I'm kind of easing her into this. So we do a little animation. And the animation allows for her to kind of have a voice. She knows so much about this, and I'm trying to ease her into it. So hopefully we'll have a chat with Karan as well, just like you'll inspire us. So how did you meet Pat? And did your husband also have challenges that he had to overcome with lifestyle changes?
So first of all, we met, wow, at this point, it's 11 years ago. I'm going to get that math wrong. But anyways, we met we met a long time ago. And it was before I was keto. And it was, I think one of the things that's interesting to me is that, we put off doing things that are good for ourselves because of what we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not to say that I wasn't dating, but I wasn't hard dating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just dating once in a while and whatever. And so when we met, we were actually both, though, intentionally looking to find a relationship. And that's when we found each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, go figure. When you're actually trying to accomplish something, you accomplish it.
Right.
And he doesn't, like, we were both overweight, obviously, by that point, because this is like after my daughter was born. And I think the thing that was interesting is that when I started to live this lifestyle, he didn't understand. He was scared for me because he's like, what are you doing? Right. I remember him trying to convince me to go see a dietitian. And in my head, I'm thinking the dietitian is going to tell me to eat low fat. And that's
Right.
not my problem. So I think initially he was really scared for me, and obviously wanting me to be healthy
Mm-hmm.
and wanting me to succeed. And then when he saw that, I want to get the number right, I believe it was like 3 months into doing what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
he asked me about my hip, and I had forgotten that that's why I had started this.
Wow.
And it was just like, it was not there anymore. It was just better.
Just
And I think that clicked for both of us, because I had forgotten why I was doing it. And he was like, you don't feel it at all. And it was gone.
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. And by the way, just for um, clinicians who have training in nutrition, like myself, dietitians included, the expectation is to follow the standard advice, and they are doing their best to align with that recommendation. And in some ways, they've been indoctrinated into something that they assume is correct, but the results in my clinical practice suggested it wasn't correct. And there are plenty of people who follow that advice and figure it out, maybe, but there are more people who follow that advice and don't do well. So I always tell people you have to get the results to believe it. And I think that's really important. And that's what kind of led us down this different path, because we were just not satisfied with the results we were getting. What's really interesting about you, you mentioned that you met Pat before you started your journey, and you also have lost a ton of weight, 70 pounds, right? So most people believe that they won't find that person when you guys were seeking each other.
Mm.
They won't find them when they're not at this quote unquote ideal weight. So, what would you say to somebody who believes that's the philosophy they should follow and they should, get to that perfect size before they seek the partner who they may spend the rest of their life with?
The most important thing that you said there that like struck a chord with me is perfect size. There's no such thing as perfection.
Yeah.
And I feel like when we really let ourselves see that happiness and weight are not connected, that's when life changes. Because when my total focus is on being happy, and I understand that happiness comes from action, happiness comes from interaction, happiness comes from, first of all, growth. So me becoming a better person in some way, or doing interesting things that are new. Or so if you're not moving forward, the possibility that you're happy is very, very small, because that's the way humans function, right? We're interested in learning, and we're constantly looking for new, right?
Mhm.
But the flip side of the coin is that it's not only about new.
Mhm.
There's comfort in knowing how things go,
Mhm.
right? We that's why children love schedules, right? They love to know what the boundaries are,
Mhm. Yeah.
because there's comfort in that. So when we add these two things together, I think what we start to realize is that I needed to be happy before I could have found anybody, because I can't give what I don't have,
Mm.
right? I'm not going to give a happy interaction if I'm not a happy person,
Mm.
right? I would have been taking too much from him, right? And then he would have felt me as needy,
Mm.
and that's not good.
Yeah.
But the other thing, though, just looking at the weight part, is that if I accept where I am, then I can work on my weight. One thing that people don't realize is that the reason we struggle when we're only focused on weight loss, and we think, and we're linking that to our happiness, whatever I do today is not going to result on a weight loss on the scale tomorrow. So because I'm not going to get that immediate satisfaction of lost 5 pounds,
Mhm.
it's very hard to do that good behavior day after day.
Mm.
But when I reframe that to be about health, what happens? If I ate the appropriate diet that I've chosen for myself, let's say, so in this case, we're talking about keto. If I ate 20 grams of carbs or less today, that's a health win. I feel good about it. If I went to bed on time, that's a health win. I feel good about it. If I drank water today, that's a health win. I feel good about it.
Mm.
Everything that I do that's towards a health win, I can feel good about today, because that's what I'm trying to improve.
Mm.
And the funny part is, those small things that don't result in a weight loss, immediate weight loss, result in faster good feeling. Like you feel that's what's so unfortunate, is that people don't realize that that feel good that happens, you see that before the weight,
Mm.
and it pushes you because that feels good.
Mm.
So if you want to flip it around, why do we like eating junk food? If you look at the flip side of that coin,
That's right. That's
because
right.
it gives us that dopamine hit. It gives us that
That's right.
serotonin release, all those feel good hormones that make our body actually feel good and makes our emotions rise. But that same rise in body, so my body feels good, is followed by my body feels bad, because
Mhm.
inflammation is put, right?
That's right.
So if we don't understand that that happens, we keep taking that little dopamine hit, serotonin rush, feel good thing that happens for a few moments, but then leads to us feeling bad, and we have to do it again and do it again and do it again. And now we're in trouble,
Right. I love
right? Versus the long term, I ate healthy and my body feels good longer.
it. Mm.
And it feels amazing because I can play with my kids, my grandkids. I can go for long walks. I can run up the stairs. I mean, honestly, 5 years ago, I couldn't step up on the curb. That's how much pain I was in. I run up my stairs regularly just because I can.
Right. The curb.
Yeah, the curb. It was
Wow.
crazy.
You have really blessed us with this, because so often when we talk about the dopamine effect of eating the bad foods and the sugars, we forget of, all the great impacts that eating the right way will have. And it's so important to reframe that, because when I have my ribeye for lunch, which is crazy to imagine for a guy who was a vegetarian, 10 years ago. So
Oh,
eating
wow.
ribeye for lunch, right? But I feel, even if it's because I don't feel bad an hour later, I'm not tired. Even if it's just that, I feel, and so I can have an afternoon clinic where I'm just still that same energy. In fact, if I come to clinic and I don't have that energy people expect, they think something's wrong. They can tell immediately, what's going on, Dr. Hampton? You're not yourself. And just that daily ability to feel good and to interact with my team a certain way and to have mental clarity and when I'm making decisions and just be a kind of person people want to be around has a lot to do with what I put in my mouth. So I really think it's important that people really understand. You may not get that little hit you were used to, but you'll also feel good in the short term and the long term versus just feeling good in the short term and then feeling bad in the long term. So I appreciate that. One of the things I love about your YouTube channel is you frame things in a way that teaches us about metabolic health, but you also focus on mental health. You're really focused on mental health in a way that most people aren't. And what was exciting, I think, for both of us is when you shared a recent study talking about the benefits that keto will bring to our mind, to mental health. So, not sure if everybody's heard of that study, and I'll make sure to have a link in the notes, but talk about what that study told us about keto and mental health.
Yeah, that was amazing to me because it was a study that Dr. Dannon did. And it was, I'll just read you the title here. It's the Keto Diet for Refractory Mental Illness, a retrospective analysis of 31 patients.
Okay.
And what was really interesting to me when I was reading through this was the line where we saw that every single person who completed the study improved. That's 100%.
I know. Nothing, no
Like,
drug does that, right?
I couldn't believe that they were actually able to say that every person had an improvement. Now, out of those, every person having an improvement, which is like, okay, they could have a slight improvement. Like,
Mhm.
we do know that sometimes the results of studies are pushed a little harder than they are. Okay, 12 achieve clinical remission. That's, again, in such a short study, how can 12 people, right? So it's like, that was just amazing. And it's all with food.
Crazy.
The other thing that I thought was cool about that study was that within 3 weeks of starting the diet, there was improvement seen. Like, so if we just stop and talk about like medication,
Mhm.
if I'm depressed or anxious or most of the mental health things that we take medication for, there's 3 to 6 weeks of getting used to the
Right.
medication before you see a positive.
That's right.
And here we have 3 weeks and they are already feeling better. It blows my mind because I feel like we don't, first of all, I don't know how this study wasn't on every newscast
I
around the world.
I
That's
know.
part one.
I know.
But part two, I don't think that we really understand how significant this is,
Mhm.
that food was able to alleviate depression, um, schizoaffective, I think it was. And I'm trying to remember the
Mhm.
other one
And maybe
was,
even
oh,
bipolar. Yeah,
bipolar.
bipolar, yeah.
That that food was able to help with that. I
Mm,
just love it.
mm.
I love this study. I was excited, like you can't imagine when I saw this.
Yeah.
And but goes back to one of the most important things I keep thinking about, which is like that connection between insulin and cortisol.
Mm.
And the fact that when you eat sugar and your insulin rises, well, eventually your cortisol rises. And cortisols are related to stress. And so I don't understand how there isn't a connection and how we're not looking at that connection harder. And it's a simple thing. It's not, I mean, cortisol is not the be all end all, but it's one of the simple things that we keep: reduce your stress, reduce your stress. We're always told this,
That's right.
right? How do we reduce our stress if the food we eat is pushing our stress hormone?
I mean, it's so logical. And what's amazing and exciting, National Institutes of Health, at least in the US, says 21 million people have issues around depression. That's just one diagnosis. Let's add up all the psychological diagnoses, right? And who knows what the percentage of people who suffer. But imagine if we could impact that many people by what they put in their mouth. As you have suggested, it should have been breaking news. It should have been. So unfortunately, people have to go to a podcast to hear this. And they should be able to go to their clinician and say, by the way, I know we've been treating you with this, this medicine. There's another way we can help you. And for some of you, maybe we can wean you down on your dose or get you off medicine if you're one of those people who are successful with this. I just think that there's so much hope. And I think it's important for anybody who hears our voices today that you have to feel empowered to start the healing journey. You keep your clinician involved. You may want to share that study. I would literally take that study that we have in the link in the notes and say, here's something I just read. Would you walk with me to help me heal? Because I'm tired of side effects. I'm tired of not being myself. If there's a possibility I can heal with this, please walk with me. And and I really want to use that type of language, walk with me, because I do not believe there's clinicians out there that are trying to not share this information. I just don't think they know it. Most clinicians follow studies that focus on medicines, not studies that focus on nutrition. And until we get to the place where that becomes our primary focus, we will have to, kind of be our own advocates. So thank you I just want to bring that study up because I know a lot of what you share on your channel deals with how we think, our mental health, and I want to make sure people hear that. So, but I do want to get very basic just for a moment. I'm always shocked at the number of people who come to my office and they're like, what are carbs? What's keto? They just don't know. I mean, you would think they would know, but this is the world we live in. So just really briefly, what do you think? How would you define keto? And when it comes to counting carbs, is that necessary for people to do keto and achieve metabolic health?
So keto is getting into the keto diet is about getting into the ketogenic state. And one of the problems that I've had is that you hear keto and low carb, high fat used interchangeably, and they're not the same. Low carb, high fat doesn't necessarily mean that I'm low enough in my carb to get into a ketogenic state. So that's the one defining term that I would say there. Now, in order to get into that ketogenic state, if I need to be under 20 grams of carbs, which is what most doctors agree on, like that's the number. And now the question is, why is that the number? Because technically keto is 50 grams of carbs less. So why do we keep saying 20? Right. And what most people don't understand, and this is the part that scares most people, and I think this is why they don't want to hear about it. You're already metabolically damaged if your weight is too high. That's the one piece of information that if doctors would share that with people. Like, I was seeing my doctor for years. At no point was I told, Violet, you have metabolic damage because your weight is more than it should be. And if I was told that, maybe I would have taken this more seriously earlier, because that would have been scary to me to understand that I was metabolically damaged. But we don't know. So if we don't know, we keep going through life thinking. Now, here's another piece of the puzzle, though, because you can be thin and have aches and pains, which is what I was the first half of my life. I was already metabolically damaged. I had inflammation. right? Joint pain is inflammation.
Hmm.
I feel like the first thing we need to understand is that, yes, I need to look at my carb count. I need to understand my carb count when I do keto, because not everybody's number to be in a ketogenic state is the same. So 50 is the technical number, 20 is what doctors believe. I'm not at 20.
Hmm.
I have to be 18 or I start to have my inflammation come back,
Wow.
right? That's how metabolically damaged I
Hmm.
was,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Now, we know that it takes 7 to 10 years to rebuild a body. So 7 to 10 years from now, will I be back to a place where I have enough metabolic health that I could go over 20 and still be in a ketogenic state? Maybe.
Hmm.
Would I risk it? Probably not.
That's right.
Right. And it's one of those things where I feel like it's like once you know how great it feels to work out and if you actually enjoy the workouts you're doing, why would you ever stop?
Hmm.
Once you know how great it feels to eat properly, once you've let go of your cravings and you're not chasing, as you're not addicted to sugar anymore, why would you go back there?
Mm.
But people do, right? People do, and I think it's because they don't fully understand the carb number piece of the puzzle. You do need to track. I tell everyone I talk to, you should start off tracking, and the only thing that would in my mind give you the permission to not track is that you know how much you're eating and you've been eating that meal enough that when you put it in the calculator, you're eating that that's the amount.
That's right.
But that still means I'm weighing my food at the minimum if I'm eating any large amounts of carb.
That's right. I
But
love
if
that.
I know like 100 grams of broccoli is X amount of carb and I'm good with that, then I'm good with that.
Yeah. Name any fruit, Violet. Just name a fruit.
The worst one is banana.
Right. So 28 carbs for a
Yeah.
medium banana. So I want everybody to, I asked Violet to name a fruit because if she names a fruit, I can probably tell you how many carbs. Do I count carbs like I did in the past? In my head, I kind of do, but I kind of don't. Once you've gone through this exercise, you'll just know. So I don't have to, you put something in front of me, I can tell you how many carbs. I want everybody who is on this journey to know. And there will come a point when you'll just know. What I love about what you shared just now, which resonates with me, is you said, once you know, you don't want to go back, right? Now, for me, it was an irritable bowel issue. When people
Mhm.
say, you're so disciplined, you're different, I can't be like you. Well, if you suffered the way I did with irritable bowel, you're not trying to go back to that. And so my metabolic damage, as you framed, I've not heard it stated that way, is at a point where the closer I am to carnivore, the better I feel. So I
Mm.
do, I'm kind of a ketovore, but I tend to be a carnivore in a lot of days because that's what my body feels is best for it. Everybody's going to be different. And you kind of have your number, I have my number, but I think everybody has to do their own little experiments. So thank you for introducing metabolic damage to my brain, because I think that's a terminology I think a lot of people should understand. So,
And I also want to add just to what you just said. Um, Trying to like if I know what my number is, so like I know my number is 18. But the other reason that we struggle with keto is because we've been taught to maximize. We're always trying to maximize. I see a lot of people that they're trying to get as close to 20 as they can.
mhm,
And the question is why?
mhm,
Are you allowing yourself to see how do I feel when I eat this much veg versus I eat that much veg versus I
mhm,
eat no veg versus,
mhm,
and I feel like that's why we end up in the scenario that we are in, because for you, if you overeat sugar, your bowels are going to be back in a bad
yeah,
situation.
that's
For
right.
me, it's pain, it's inflammation.
Mm,
What happens when we are actually on this journey for weight loss?
mm,
Well, I've been fat before. It
mhm,
doesn't hurt. It doesn't look nice, but it doesn't hurt. And I feel like the problem is, and why we're able to yo-yo diet is because when we're on the way back up, it doesn't hurt. And I'm so used to looking at myself in the mirror, I don't notice the weight coming back on
mm,
until it's excessive. So until I can actually see it on my face, or I put on something and it doesn't fit right. but it doesn't hurt. And that's the problem. And I don't want everyone to need to hurt. My good luck was that it hurt me.
Right.
Right? That was my good luck. But it doesn't mean everyone needs that problem. What it means is that we need to be realistic with ourselves,
Mhm.
that riding that line of 20, of 18, when I learned my number was 18, do you know what I did? I dropped to 15
Mm.
because I didn't even want to be near the
Didn't
number.
want
I didn't
yeah,
want to
didn't
accidentally wake
mhm.
up again in the middle of the night in pain.
That's right.
And now, if I eat carbs once a week, that's amazing. So I feel like understanding what your body's trying to help you understand is the
Mhm.
most important piece of this puzzle. And I'm not saying you have to be carnivore. That's not this conversation.
That's right.
The conversation is about, where do you feel best?
That's right.
And if I really let myself understand that, oh, getting close to the line isn't helping me, where do
Mhm.
I end up feeling best?
That's right. I
There's
like that.
so much veg we can eat and stay under 20. It's crazy.
It's
I mean,
ton.
when I was under 18, the size of the plates that I was making, and yet I was under 20 because I was
Yeah.
choosing the right veg.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody doesn't believe Violet, just search right now, spinach, carbs, greens, collard greens, carbs. It's like one or two or some crazy. So you can literally eat, 8 to 10 servings of that and still be under 20. So I do believe it's what you choose that matters the most. And you know, what I like about your YouTube channel also, you say wellness warriors, right? And those wellness warriors may struggle. You used the word struggle a moment ago. So some people are getting through the struggle because they have you to kind of help coach them every week through your YouTube channel. But a lot of people will start keto, they struggle, and then they quit. So if you have somebody in front of you who is wanting to quit, what would you say to them?
Hmm. What I would say is, make sure that whatever you were doing that you thought was keto before you quit was actually keto.
Mm,
Again, if you haven't been tracking, you don't really know if you ever got into ketosis. And I think the number one thing that makes people want to quit is keto flu.
mm,
So this, and what I've learned through talking to people is, a lot of people are cycling in and out of keto flu and they
mm,
don't realize,
right.
right? Because they're not actually keeping their carb intake under 20.
That's
So what ends up happening is, like, you do well for a few days, but you're just barely starting to get into ketosis. And then you have a cheat day, a cheat meal, a cheat whatever, you're over. So then, but you never actually, so you're just living those negative physical side effects of sugar withdrawal
right.
over and
Over and over.
over and over.
That's right. That is so true.
So
And
I would encourage them to just look at their numbers before they quit. Make
yeah,
sure.
yeah, and that's very practical advice because there are people who and this may work for a metabolically healthy person, but most of the people we're talking to are not metabolically healthy. Um, so they'll say it's okay to cycle in and out, but man, that's playing with fire a little bit for a lot of people. And I think, and we're not even talking about processed food addiction, all those other issues that you're kind of teeing up if you do that. Um, so
But I
all
would
of that makes
also,
hmm?
sorry, I would also add that,
Yes.
as they say, cycling is okay to cycle in and out. The question that I'm maybe I'm going to throw this back to you, but the question that I'm going to look at is, if I'm cycling in and out, then I'm also taking the food that I was chasing before and putting it back on my plate. And then, so the question is also, if I'm actually addicted to this food,
Mm,
isn't that just going to keep me chasing it all the time? Like, we wouldn't tell someone that took alcohol out of their life, it's okay to cycle it in once in a while. Why do
yeah.
we say that about food that's damaging our internal health?
Yeah. Um, I I have enough patients who struggle with processed food addiction and sugar addiction to say that it's fair to say for most people, the key is to have awareness that that's a possibility. So when I have my link tree, Dr. Tony Hampton link tree, I have a link to Dr. Joan Iflin's art community, processed food addiction. I have them answer those 11 questions that deal with alcohol addiction, but we also use it for processed food addiction. And if I find that a patient struggles, that patient should absolutely avoid the things that will trigger them. But there are some people that can get away with that. Now, in a way, I can, because if I eat some keto product or something, there are times when I can get away with it. But getting away with it doesn't mean it doesn't bother me. It just means that I didn't get a high enough dose of it for it to bother me. But it will not trigger me. Although in retrospect, as I think about it, if you put that trigger on my counter and I have to see it every day, it's going to trigger me. So I just think you have to kind of know yourself. And I just think for most people, you're playing with fire. And if you decide to do that, give yourself an honest assessment of how you're responding to that. And if you find that you thought you could do it and you can't, then why would you do that to yourself? Because of the benefits of your metabolic health improving will outweigh any of the short-term dopamine spiking benefits of doing it in the short term. So that's so I try not to be too strict about these things, because I think there's so much bio individuality that would allow people to, maybe do things that the next person can't do. But I think for many people in the United States, Canada, and beyond, they're going to struggle if they continue to put those triggers in front of them. And that actually speaks to kind of what I wanted to ask you next, which is these foods, these comfort foods make us feel so good, right? And trying to overcome not getting that good feeling can be a struggle. You kind of spoke to this a little bit earlier, but I want you to comment a little bit more about how do you overcome that desire to eat these trigger foods, these comfort foods, knowing that they're not good for us, in a person who's done that their entire life? How do you talk to a person like that?
One of the things that is so important for us to realize is that we always want to feel good and we always want to feel better. So these comfort foods, if I'm eating it because I'm upset, the question becomes, is eating this comfort food actually making me feel better? Or is this problem that's there still going to be there after I've eaten this comfort food? So one thing I try to get people to look at is it actually solving the problem? Now, if you do keto long enough, those internal physical pushes towards sugar are going to come down, but you still have the psychological push to go get the thing. Right. And in order to look at that part, what I want people to think about is when I'm eating and I'm not chasing that sugar anymore, but I see it and physically it's not pulling me towards it, then it really tells me that there's a thought process happening. And usually the thought process is something like, oh, I shouldn't eat that. And the question is, why shouldn't I eat that? I think that when we form questions like that for ourselves, I shouldn't do that, we're keeping a bad idea, rather than what happens if I say, I'm a person that eats healthy. Now, all of a sudden, when I see that chocolate bar, is that healthy? So just by changing what I say to myself, changing to the idea that it's not that I can't eat it. Of course I can. I have teeth, right? But I'm a person that eats healthy. So if I want to continue eating healthy, do I eat that? Changing the story is what matters the most. Right? Of course I could eat rice. Of course I could eat potatoes. When I eat those things, how do I feel? Okay, so since I like to feel good, I choose to eat other things. And it's always better to make a choice than to deny myself something.
Yeah. I like that. And I also don't want to trigger those those neurons in my brain that are kind of dormant. They're chilling. They're chilling out until we drive by our favorite donut shop. And then they're like, hey, don't you remember we used to hang out at that donut shop? And so I don't want to trigger those neurons to wake up and to take over and to then get me back into that old lifestyle that I previously had. So I just think, again, I just want to live in a safe place for my brain, for my body. And the less I put myself in harm's way, the more likely I'll find success down the road. A lot of people um, are doing net carbs. And I tend to say total carbs, but I think it depends on the person, right? And net carbs give you more flexibility. And one of the things that you think about are your alternatives when you're making cake and cookie, for example, cakes and cookies. It can be coconut flour, it can be almond flour, um, which allows for you to eat a keto product. The question is that a safe way to go for most of us if we want to indulge in those things we love? So, what's your thoughts on using the alternative flours as a way to be a keto dietary pattern follower?
So many things that you just said there. The things we love. I want to start there.
Yeah.
I really struggle with people saying they love insert food
Right.
because that's an addiction.
Mm.
We don't love food. We love people. We love activities. We don't love
Mhm.
food. That's addiction talking,
Mm.
right? Certain foods taste good. Certain
Mhm.
foods taste bad. But right. So with that in mind, what I'm going to say is as a transition, I think that most people are going to use these products and they're going to, and
Mhm.
that's fine. I did at the beginning. But there's an interesting thing that happened for me. Not everybody's like me because I start off as a person that doesn't like to cook. So
Mhm.
the extra work that goes into cooking keto treats and whatever,
Mm.
yeah, so not interested. But some
Mhm.
people love that,
That's right.
right? Like my spouse, he loves that kind of stuff. He loves cooking. So when he initially was in his keto transition phase, he did a lot of that kind of stuff, right? I did it a bit. I fell away from it faster but eventually he fell away from it too.
Mm.
And the question is why? Because you start to see where all it's doing is keeping you attached to these foods that weren't healthy for you in the first place.
Yeah.
And you know what's unfortunate is that it isn't about what I'm eating, it's about the carb count.
Mhm.
And so one thing that I will say that we all need to be conscious of is this. If you get all the junk food out of your life, we can still overeat our carbs,
Mhm.
right? That's why for me, I had to put nuts down. It
Mhm.
became this new thing that like, oh my goodness, I was able to overdo it. Would you believe that cashews to me taste sweet?
Mm.
So this new thing that walked in the door that all of a sudden now I'm getting that happening,
Mm.
right? And I had to put it down. So now, again, not everybody, as you said, not everybody is as sensitive as I am,
Mhm.
right? And not everybody chases sweet either. Some people go savory,
Right.
right? So that's where chips and other kinds of things come in. It's about paying attention to where the carbs are coming from and making sure that you're not overdoing it.
Mhm.
There are lots of people that eat nuts and they're fine,
Yeah.
right? I eat nuts and I'm off to the races.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of like you. I can't eat tree nuts. I have to have allergies, but peanuts I can. Um, and I think about Dr. Eric Westman at Duke, and when he does his page 4, he's like, no nuts. And that's because it sounds like we're not unusual in that a lot of people are triggered by nuts. I do also agree with you that transitioning is okay. I think Dr. Eric Westman, going back to him, would also say it's okay to use whatever you have to do because he's like you. What's the carbs? You know, that's the most important thing. And if you're transitioning, that's probably okay. We do have to deal with processed food addiction, sugar addiction folk as well. But so I think using a little common sense and trying to stay in your lane, being honest. So nuts. So if I'm being ketovore, can I eat nuts during those ketovore days, which by definition is less than 10 carbs if you want to look for a definition? I could do that. But if I keep it on the counter, when am I going to stop walking by those nuts and not want to grab some? So I think be honest, put that stuff out of sight. And this conversation has led to me thinking of a question about what makes foods addictive? I mean, any thoughts on why foods are so addictive, rather it's nuts or the processed foods we eat?
It's the sugar,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. We I can't remember what year it was, but there has been science that have shown that sugar lights up the same part of our brain as alcohol and drugs, going back to the early 1900s. Like we know this, right? Sorry, PET scans. So we know this, and I feel like it's just not talked about,
Mm-hmm.
but we know. So if we're able to light up that part of our brain by eating, for me, by eating nuts, then what we start to realize is that when I was doing my regular diet, like, so what happens? You eat, all the sugar comes in, which is toxic to the system. Your
Mm-hmm.
body puts it away. You get hungry. And what are you called for? What's called to you? More sugar.
Right.
And we just go through the cycle over and over several times a day. I know for a fact that if I was doing that with alcohol, every person in my family would have been all over me. Violet, what are you doing? Oh my gosh, if I was doing that with alcohol, they would have stopped me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm doing it with food. So that's normal. And I feel like we need to be more aware that it's not healthy either way. And unfortunately, if you look at it, the length of time that it takes before the problem shows itself, that's why it's not jumped on as much,
Mm-hmm.
I think, because it takes so long for your knees to hurt. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I not that it's our culture. So I was not throwing anybody under the bus. It's our culture. But I've been overeating sugar from the time I started eating solid food.
Mm-hmm.
It's our culture,
Yeah.
right? Every plate is rice,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like if we don't understand that, we keep making the mistake. And I don't think that North America is that far away. We start our kids on oats, so oat cereal and fruit. It's the first thing we give our kids is
That's right.
fruit.
That's right.
We are overloading them with sugar. So was it a surprise that by 20, my knees were sore?
Right.
Right. And we just ignore it. Or, well, I didn't. When you go to the doctor, as you're talking about, you go to the doctor and you say, my knees hurt, and they're sending you to physio.
Right.
They're not asking, what are you eating?
Yeah. And yeah, why? Why are your knees hurting at 20? And we should normalize that knees should be hurting at 20. It's just not normal, but our
Or that we
society.
should get fat by 40.
Right, right, right. It's not
All of
normal.
these things are normalized.
I know. It's mind-boggling. So I think we have a lot of work to do. There are many reasons why people fail to achieve their health-related goals. We know one of them is sugar addiction. Any other things that you have thought of as you've worked with your wellness warriors that come to mind as relates to why we struggle to achieve our goals?
Fear of failure. We don't want to fail. We don't want to look bad.
Mm.
And so a lot of people that I speak to start off their keto journey with nobody knowing. Shh,
Mm.
don't tell anybody. And it's
Right.
like, how's that going to work? You're going to go to work. You're going to go out to eat. Like, and there's this thing that happens where, so they're keto at home, but then their normal standard diet outside of home, which now we're cycling in and out of keto flu and we're cycling in and out of being, and it doesn't work. Right. And of course you have the sustainability problem that people talk about, that, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable if what you believe is that I have to eat like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly feel that one of the interesting things is that if you have an allergy everybody is okay with you not eating the thing you're allergic to.
Hmm.
And I really encourage people to just say you have an allergy to sugar.
Right.
People will leave you alone.
Yeah, it works. When we go to restaurants and we're having pushback as we are tweaking the menu, we say I'm allergic to that. That's exactly what we say. And that what are they gonna at that point their antennas really rise and they're like, well, we don't want to kill them.
Yeah.
So we will. So I think, that's a nice, handy tip I think people can use. When we're at those restaurants, there's alcohol available. And I remember Maria Emmerich and her husband talking about the oxidative priority principle, where alcohol, which is a fuel source, believe it or not, but it's also a toxin. So your body prioritizes its metabolism over glucose and and fat and protein, etc. But so we already know that alcohol consumption should be limited, particularly if you're trying to lose weight or not have uncontrolled blood sugars. But man, what if I kind of started my keto journey as a person who overconsumes alcohol, right? What does that person do? They're already addicted to this substance. They're trying to do keto. Alcohol is not good for you achieving your goals. How do you deal with a person who has that extra layer of struggle they're going to have to overcome?
So the interesting thing is that any addiction is about solving the original problem. So just changing your food isn't necessarily going to solve it if the original problem is still there. So the
Mhm.
alcoholic would need to back up and look at their life and try to
Mhm.
figure out, why do I avoid my life through drinking? That being said, um, if I'm actually trying to heal my body, I might be willing to invest in not drinking. So sometimes the interesting thing is that if I'm scared enough, I put drinking down for a little while. And this is a bit of a mind game, though, because most people know that I cannot drink for a week or a month, or right, but I'm going to go back to it. And so they have that thought, I'm going to go back to it. It's once I've not done it for long enough, can I get myself to see that it's better for me not to go back to it? But if you really want success, I would deal with that original problem first.
Yeah, that makes sense. Root cause, root cause, root cause. So a lot of what we talked about today has a lot to do with how we think. So it's clear that your focus on mental health is important for people to be successful, right? So, so I really appreciate that, because I think until we deal with our brain, that organ, that thing above, our shoulders, I think we're going to struggle. So I really enjoy the content you share on your channel. I appreciate you collaborating with me, and hopefully we'll do more in the future. So you've done a great job with the things we've talked about with this lifestyle thing, but we have a nest and a rope, and we are trying to make sure you, as the leader of the wellness warriors, are healthy, right? So when you
Okay.
think about the next 12 months for you, when it comes to protecting your nest, where are you going to focus so you can continue your journey?
Well, I looked at this and what I would say is that the thing that I maybe would love to pay more attention to is organisms.
Hmm.
So that microbiome part of the story, I think that the thing that I've figured out is that when you don't eat something for a period of time, your microbiome changes.
Yes.
And one of the things that we don't think about is, if I want to reintroduce that, how do if I just haven't eaten, which has happened to me, by the way, haven't eaten asparagus in a long time, and then Pat cooks asparagus, that's a problem.
Right.
Right? Like, so I feel like the thing that I need to pay more attention to is, for those, the small amount of veg that I do eat, keeping it there a bit more regularly. Like I said, like I maybe eat once a week some kind of veg, but then it's a different one every time. And that, I think, is a little bit too stressful for my body. So trying to get a better schedule, let's say, of like peppering those things in a little bit more often if I'm going to keep them.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I've been thinking about in terms of the next few months. And the other thing that Well, pollutants I find interesting as well, because again, this back to that idea of alcohol. Um, Last year, maybe I drank twice. So it's like one of those things where I'm really good at the ones I can control.
Hmm.
It's harder for the things you can't control. Like there's smog, I mean, you walk outside and you accidentally walk
Right.
through someone else's puff of cigarette smoke. And
I know.
so I'm constantly finding myself in these scenarios where it's like, I don't know if there's a better way to do it, but it's something that's top of mind for me right now. And one thing I want to ask you about, so
Yes.
just to flip this around on you for a minute, what I notice is missing from your list is work
Yeah.
and play.
Yeah.
So how are we gonna maybe work on that a little bit?
That's funny. Well, I'll have to tweak it. And you're so funny. The sort of functional medicine tree was the foundation of this acronym, and the
Okay.
roots of the functional medicine tree speak to these are the things you have to if you struggle with your circulatory system, how you communicating, or the structural part of your body, your stomach, your gut, whatever, your skin. These are the things you have to do to fix that. Now, I could argue that life experiences could incorporate that into that part because life experiences will allow you to have work and play. In fact, one of the things me and my lovely wife will be doing since my kids are now in St. Louis is we have a little bit more time for. In fact, we're watching the new Amsterdam, I think it's called. Uh, but it's a nice little medical show, and we just sit around. And to be honest with you, when you're so busy, you don't even have time to sit down and watch a movie together, let alone go see Whitney Houston, which we just saw recently as a couple. So I think you're
Oh,
right. Like if we're not enjoying the journey, we must we won't do well. So I think as I message that part of the rope, the E, I'll kind of make sure that that's message. One of the things I like about having an acronym like that is that it gives me wiggle room. I can talk about relationships. I can talk about, like you said, organisms. So it gives us room to kind of go beyond just keto, right?
yeah.
It gives us room. So I appreciate that. I'll take your advice and make
Because
sure.
I need to work on
Yeah.
work and play. I
Yeah.
feel like I need to have better structure at work, and I need to find more time for play.
We have to. And it's so good. If you're going to be metabolically healthy and you can't enjoy it, well, what's the point? And we don't even want what we're doing right now to be a barrier to that. We want to get this message out, but we need to make sure that we have time. And fortunately, we're recording on a Sunday, and I will be able to do some of that today. So I appreciate that. And I really am excited that people who follow me are now able to follow you. So let's make sure they know how to do that. So share the best way for them to find your content.
That would be going to YouTube and going to The Road to Health Keto Done Right. That would be the best way to follow me.
I think that's it. And so thank you. And for those who follow me, when you see a video after you started following Violet, let them know that you found her because you follow me, just to kind of make the circle complete. I do appreciate you, Violet, just for taking so much time to have this conversation. Looking forward to us collaborating in the future and just continue doing the wonderful work you're doing out there.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Thank you. So for everybody checking us out today, nice conversation with Violet, providing a little bit of a different perspective, a perspective I think will remind us that achieving our health related goals has a lot to do with how we think, our mental health, how we perceive things. Um, that's what she shared today, and I think that's what she shares on her YouTube channel, empowering our minds with the right knowledge so we can actually achieve our goals. So I hope that today, because of what you heard, there's less self-doubt, because in our journey, we will face challenges, right? If you're breathing and living on this earth, you're going to face challenges. And, so the goal is to have the tools when you face challenges to be successful. And I hope this episode helped you in that regard. And I hope her YouTube channel will do the same. So maybe if you haven't done it yet, if you haven't gone to YouTube, I would click on that subscribe button so you can become a wellness warrior and follow Violet as she helps us with her very, nice way of expressing things. And again, a lot of it is how we think. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really appreciate you for just walking with me as we learn from experts like Violet. And we will continue to do that each and every week on the Protecting Your Nest podcast. And until we do it again, until the next episode, continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest. You've been listening to Protecting Your Nest with Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com.